been a little while since I've had my little tablet here out, but hey to everybody. I feel so uncomfortable. I've had such a good time not making videos, but for anybody that would stumble upon any of my videos, who'd be newer to the channel, I've just been paying attention to things that the news doesn't want us paying attention to for just a little skosh more than 2 years now. And yeah, the truth in the world looks infuriating. And if anybody would stumble upon my videos because you've seen concert videos I've made, you probably suffer with maybe some anger issues or depression problems or darkness you don't really understand. But yeah, the truth looks pretty infuriating. And if you're not aware by this time that this is the base of where the truth looks like it begins, you're probably going to have heart attacks, especially if you're coming from a Christian, patriotic, conservative family like I am. And, this is what it looks like the Romans did. The Vatican. This is what it looks like they're covering up.
The Invasion of Eden with Paul Anthony Wallace. Was the earth colonized by extraterrestrials? And if so, when will they return? Did they ever leave? What is the Bible really telling us? Well, let's talk about it with scholar Paul Anthony Wallace. This is part 2. And you're going to want to buckle up for this one. Let's go.
Hebrew language. Some scholars believe it's a loan word because it's just turned up from nowhere. But I argue in my books, The Eden Conspiracy and The Invasion of Eden, that Yahweh is in fact a sequence of sounds. And it's a sequence of sounds associated with draconic entities all around the world. The sequence of sounds in Yahweh can be found in languages from China, from Japan, from Nordic countries, Celtic countries. It is this repeating sound that repeats. It's in the Mesoamerican stories of Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, Cucumats. It's the Cuchedra, it's the Cuchu, it's the Drake Coca, it's the Coca from Portugal and Spain. It's the Drake Koch, is what I should have said. And then we've got the Holkis from out of Georgia and Achech from out of ancient Egypt. So I would suggest that Yahweh is not a name, it's a sequence of sounds, and it relates to a kind of being.
And I did want to give a huge shout out to our friends.
So this video is great. And Paul Wallace really, really looks like the guy that is a very good bridge. Very smart guy. Who puts this shit in people's asses as quickly as possible and with a lot of compassion. But really, really looks like the Vatican and the entire Abrahamic branch goes back to ancient Sumer, which looks like a draconian empire. And this is why the world's a disaster. So then I wanted to come on over to here. This dude, Ian Carroll, I've loved his videos that he has, like, they pop up on my news feed from like TikTok or something like that. This interview alone is so interesting. And what my Christian, conservative, patriotic family cannot understand is why I'm now on the side of what my buddy said. He said, everybody is cucking for Israel. And that looks true. And they don't see, because the Jewish own the media, and Christians too, they're all totally in cahoots against us people, or us little people, especially the ones stuck in religious psychoses, who don't realize the Bible was plagiarized and is a big DNA control mechanism and yada, yada, yada. This interview alone, I'm going to get into it because this is just a normal guy with an open mind. He's not spiritually awake at all, but he's going down the right paths and he has an open mind. It's something that millennials had kind of built into them, it looks like, and this is why they're suffering, looking like losers here, and they're not the losers. But he talks a little bit. I tried to take it to this one spot because I'm going to take a whole hunk of this because it's important. He goes through a lot of stuff on here that just normal open-minded people are talking about that you're not going to see on the news. And it really makes sense how the controllers of the Republicans and Democrats are all on the same team. And it's bad. It's real bad. Real bad.
Speed and accuracy are inherently diametrically opposed often.
How much do you think, and I don't know how much you've thought about it, but how involved do you believe various intelligence agencies are in behind the scenes in social media?
Well, I think about it a lot. And I think it is massively, I think it's huge, way bigger than most people think.
I think the Twitter files really kind of exploded this thing.
Yeah, there was that version of it where before Elon bought X, I don't think anyone had realized it. But if you start to go through our history from MySpace till today, we had never, because the Twitter files showed us that the government was actively asking all of the social media companies, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, X, Google, all of them, just hey, censor this information. Hey, delete these accounts.
Right.
Hey, push this down. And for the most part, they were all complying. And what that means is there was never a time until Elon bought X that we ever had free speech on any of our social platforms of any size, right? Except for maybe some of Reddit at some time, but Reddit is highly controlled now.
Right.
And 4chan, which is
hell,
the dumpster behind Wednesday's. It's cool, but whatever. So I think that people had thought that we were operating in this everyone can share their own stuff now, and we have this flow of information, but no one realized that free speech is not the same as everyone has a social media account and can post, but there's a lot of censorship and all this other stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And so the Twitter files exposed that we had been living in this fake sort of version of Web 3.0 or Web 2.0, I guess. Mm-hmm. And now it's really interesting to analyze how much the news landscape has changed just since we've had one big social platform where there's at least mostly free speech. And there's obviously still some censorship on X, and it's kind of it's controversial. But
yeah,
what has happened is that X is so fast at reporting information, and I realized this on producing my YouTube show, that I was trying to do kind of weekly what's happening this week mixed with more evergreen, big picture stuff that relates to it. And I was realizing that more and more, normally my thing is to look up articles and to look up sources and news and shit. And I was realizing that actually X is a better source for basically everything now, because all those articles are posted to X. But beyond that, stuff is breaking on X, hours, days even, before it gets published in the news. And so the news is starting to source X. Everyone is starting to source X. And so that's one difference where now the information is coming up out of the collective group, the collective consciousness, so to speak, our collective hive mind. That's where the reporting is coming out of now. That's the fastest. And now reporters are all there and they're all being sourced from there. But
So when he says information is coming up from the collective consciousness, the collective hive mind, that is the collective unconsciousness. It is all fucked up fake news. But there is a collective conscious community, that's also so fucked up.
Right.
There's this other piece where now the things that we weren't allowed to talk about, that we didn't even realize we weren't allowed to talk about, like the most obvious one is Israel and Gaza and AIPAC and just all that other, like
Here
this
we
whole
go.
hornet's nest of stuff.
Yeah.
Is suddenly like, holy shit, no one even realized how much we weren't allowed to talk about any of that, because everyone that would talk about it would get deplatformed and debanked and like shadow banned to hell and like accused of weird shit and like sent to an insane asylum or whatever it was, like depending on who you're looking at. So it's changed the sort of like where information comes from, but it's also done this crazy thing where it's changed our perception of what even like free speech means. Because free speech is one thing when we're here in our room having a conversation between the two of us, and that's vitally important, obviously. But free speech is a whole different thing when it's the public town square connected like millions of people all together.
Right.
That's like a different beast that even the founding fathers could have never anticipated, the type of power that has. And so, to get back to your original question, yeah, the intelligence agencies, like it is actually the CIA's primary official job to control those narratives. Because think about it. Their job is to protect our country, right?
That's bullshit. Because if you go look on the CIA's website and go check out the frequency weapons and all of the technology they are using to domestically terrorize us, United States citizens, oh, it's so infuriating. But I've been working on letting anger go. But I'm just saying, it's sickening. This government is sickening.
Right? And if you wanted to overthrow America, you would not do it with a military attack. That would be the dumbest thing you could ever do. Like, we're the most powerful military in the world. You would subvert America. And the most obvious ways to subvert America are culturally, intellectually, like genetically / reproductively. Like there's all these other ways to subvert America, and they in many ways all rely on subverting our information flow. And so the CIA's mandate is to protect us from that. And the only way you protect our free speech information flow, because the nature of free speech is that we can all say whatever we want, we can share whatever we want. So that means that China can share whatever they want into there, as long as they just kind of blend right in. Same with Russia, same with Iran, same with Israel. And so the only way to protect our free speech is to control that whole space, theoretically, which is not possible. But like, if Russia could overthrow us by feeding us the narrative that like communism is great, then the only way to counter that is to feed us the narrative that capitalism is great. In a simplified way, right?
I'm sorry, I make videos under a blanket.
Narrative of like Palestinians are terrorists and Israel is always right is being fed in from this side. The only way to counter this like upswell, like, you know what I mean, is like now any narrative that comes in that could be a threat to whoever's in power, whoever wants whatever, and the CIA technically is like, you know, protecting America.
Yeah.
So whatever threat could come into that, their job is to counter that threat. But the only way to counter it is to feed a narrative in, right?
Yeah. No, I see that.
It's their official job.
So you think it's just like this?
Their official job looks like to keep the citizens from realizing that they are controlled by big religion, and we are just a skosh over 2 years now that we went through the Jewish New Year. 2 years down, 5 left of the 7-year scheduled bullshit scripted biblical tribulation, and this is why it's really bad right now. And back to Ian.
Shadow war between intelligence agencies going on behind the scenes of these social media companies. Yeah, I wonder how much. I had this guy on here a couple weeks ago, John Kiriakou, who was he was a whistleblower against the torture program for the CIA. He was he worked for the CIA for 20 something years, and then they eventually put him in prison for blowing the whistle on the torture stuff.
Classic.
And he dealt with the Mossad a lot during his career, and he told me that at one point he learned that Israel, or the Mossad, has over 200. There's a difference when you have an agent in a country, right? Like we have CIA, it's in Israel, and Israel has Mossad that's here. But there's a difference between declared and undeclared officers. Yeah. He said they have over 200 undeclared officers in the U.S.
Oh, I bet it's
so why?
Infinitely more than that.
This was in the 90s.
Yeah. So huge rabbit hole here, but Israel has always had an insane amount of spies in the U.S. and has been subverting the U.S. ever since they were founded. And that's everything from, like, they literally stole nuclear weapons from us and built a secret nuclear facility that John F. Kennedy was trying to audit and shut down, by the way. They did that with, like, some of the most famous, like, technological leaks of all time, all the way up to, like, Jonathan Pollard, the Promise software scandal, right up to 9/11. A lot of people don't know that before 9/11, there's this whole document called the Israeli Art Students DEA files. You ever heard about those? So you can find them on the internet if you search like things like DEA files Israeli art students.
Can you look that up, Steve?
You can probably find it, and it's a report written by the DEA. And what was happening is in 2000 and 2001, there is like all these government agencies were reporting. Yeah, all of those are it. And what they were doing is they, like, at first no one realized what was happening because there was these like people walking into like the DEA office in like whatever in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
And they were saying like, "Hi, I'm an art student from Israel representing this university, and I would like to sell you some art. Are you interested in looking at any art? Is there anyone I can show this art to?" It's like, why the fuck are you in the DEA's office, like, or any other government building? Like, they were just going to all these government buildings, posing as Israeli art students trying to sell art. And as they started to report it up the chain realized that this was happening all across America.
It says Tampa.
Yeah. All across
report
America.
of the DEA Tampa has revealed much information relating to these individuals. DEA agents in Tampa District Office questioned the team leader of a group of 9 individuals at length. The team leader stated he purchases the paintings for $8 to $10 from an individual in Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, Florida area. What the?
That's all a cover story, though. That's all just made up bullshit. Okay. And so the thing about this document is it's actually super lengthy, and it's really hard to get to the bottom of what it is if you don't read the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But what it is it's all across America in 2000 and 2001, the Mossad was running a massive surveillance campaign on all of our government buildings, and this was their cover, was Israeli art students, and they were using it to gain access to the buildings and then to surveil the buildings, to skim down blueprints. A lot of these people were actually ex like Israeli intelligence that had backgrounds in explosive experts, in surveillance technology and wiring, just things that like go into that building. And
were they wiring these paintings and trying to sell them to them?
I don't think so. No, maybe it's hard to say. Like, we don't know entirely because a lot of them, like, once they started to get caught, they would change their stories around a lot. Some of them got stopped and interviewed a lot. But they never really could act on it a whole lot. Oh, WikiSpooks is a whole rabbit hole.
WikiSpooks?
Do you know about WikiSpooks?
No.
Oh, you're gonna love it, dude.
Oh
WikiSpooks is Wikipedia for fucking tinfoil hat conspiracy theories, and it is the coolest resource. And it's linked just like you would think. The best one to start on is 9/11 WikiSpooks because it's the most like complete.
I clicked on that.
It doesn't have everything, and it's certainly
9/11 Israel did it.
Yeah. So you have to obviously double check everything that's on WikiSpooks.
Oh, yeah.
But it is a really fun resource to get you going because it's like nothing's held back. It's all there and it's all linked, and it's not all true, but it is actually a really cool. It's just so much fun. But
it's the opposite. It's the opposite of Wikipedia, basically. It's
exactly, because Wikipedia is all controlled.
They hold back all the fun stuff. Where if you're on WikiSpooks, you're like, hold on, you're going the other direction now. You're like, hold on, you guys are going way too far with this.
You and you wind up somewhere in the middle. Yeah. But anyways, the Israeli art students is just an obvious example of like massive Mossad spying on the U.S. And it's like. The Mossad has this other unique angle that is kind of hard to talk about because the CIA has to recruit members, right? They have to recruit and then send you out, or at the very best, like you already have this, you've got this tech company and they can approach you and be like, yo, you want to like work together for whatever reason, but you have to have an incentive that'll make a person want to work with the CIA. And then you also have to worry, like if you're going up to this Russian businessman and trying to get him to like work for the CIA, you have to also worry that he's actually going to play you and actually be working for KGB or something like that. There's all these complicated things you have to consider if you're going to run intelligence ops. Mm-hmm. But Mossad has this other angle where they represent the Jewish state and they represent the only hope for the Jewish people, like by sort of the Israeli narrative, right? And so Jews all around the world have this inherent like trained religious incentive to support Israel. And so it's a difficult thing to talk about because it's easy for it to sound like you're saying all Jews are in on some global conspiracy, which is not what I'm saying.
Right.
What I'm saying,
Jews.
It's the Jews. what I'm saying is that Jews are inherently incentivized to help Israel out, unless you don't support Israel. And there are lots of Jews that don't support Israel.
There's tons of them who don't support Israel.
Badass guys, you're saving the world. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Stand up for those guys. They need our support. But that's just my bias.
There's a huge difference between people that are Jewish and Netanyahu and his war hawks.
Yeah, Zionists and all that. But all you need to do is find, one of them, like Leslie Wexner, like, Leon Black, like whatever. And so not all Zionists even are Jewish, but they have this pool of Zionists around the world that when the Mossad approaches a Zionist, there is way more incentive for that person to work with Mossad than if CIA was approaching some random person. Right. And because of the nature of Judaism, Judaism is dispersed across countries and cultures. Judaism is not local to a region. It's not local to a country. Right. Judaism is already decentralized. And so the Mossad has this angle that leads to the, like, notice how many people are Jewish, which is like, yeah, that is kind of racist, but like there is an angle where you have to consider it because the mafia is all run by Italians for a reason, right? Organized crime has always been organized around blood because blood is the strongest tie that binds. Blood is the number one thing you can trust. And if you're going to run organized crime or an intelligence agency, you damn well better be able to trust everybody. Because if one guy gets caught and he rats you out, you're fucked. And when someone gets caught, they're very incentivized to rat you out because they could be looking at life in prison or a sweetheart deal where they disappear on an island and they're totally fine and they just have to rat you out. So you need this like incentive to keep everyone together, and that's why organized crime has always been organized around races and religions because that's the best you can get, and it works really well. And historically in America, the two most powerful were the mafia, Italian, and the mob, Jewish. And so when you're like,
so, yeah, I mean, this is why everybody screams that it's anti-Semitic to point the finger at the leaders of the Jews, because the ones that you're not allowed to talk about are totally the ones controlling the entire board. And down any rabbit hole, you're going to end up finding out that Israel is puppeting everybody and everything, and that the leaders of the Vatican and the Christians and the Muslims are all in cahoots against real God, source, and it's bad. But, I've just been trying to handle my anger by going to concerts. I'll be seeing Silent Theory this week, and I got me a floor ticket already to see Rod Wave. He's coming a week before my birthday next month, and I cannot wait to see Rod Wave. I love that dude. So if anybody's going, I'll catch you there.
Like investigating the Italian mafia and you walk into a business and everyone in there is Italian, is it racist to be like, okay, this might be a mafia establishment, right? And so in the exact same way, when you're investigating Jeffrey Epstein and you're like, okay, every single person in this network is Jewish, and he's like clearly working with Ehud Barak, the ex-prime minister of Israel, and he's clear, like Les Wexner is one of the most influential like globalist Zionist Jews in the world. That and like everything about Jeffrey Epstein's network is Jewish through and through and through and through and through, and that's part of why we know he was Mossad. But then you start to think about, so how did that network get built? And when you research it, like for example, if you read Whitney Webb's book, you realize that a lot of times that is actually just, someone approaching someone and being like, hey, both of our interests are aligned around Israel. Let's work together and found the mega corporation, or let's work together and found, the Wexner Heritage Foundation or whatever. And that will promote like global Judaism and the policies of Israel. But shoehorned into a lot of those things are these other sort of like things that look a lot like Mossad operations and tactics, and the mega group is a really good example of one where like ostensibly it's just a bunch of very wealthy Jewish like billionaires working together to like for the betterment of Israel, but all of them are like tied to organized crime, like Leslie Wexner, Jeffrey Epstein, Lauder family, you name it. And And so the Mossad has this weird other angle where they have this like cultural, racial, religious angle with which to approach people. And again, remember, they don't necessarily have to approach someone and be like, hey, we want you to be a spy, or hey, we want you to subvert your country on behalf of Israel. They might just approach someone and be like, hey, you love Israel, right? And we have this project and we could really use your support helping Israel. They don't even have to identify themselves as Mossad.
My buddy John, the ex-CIA guy, was in here the other day, and he was telling the story on how they tried to recruit him.
You mean John Perkins?
John Kiriakou.
Oh, word.
The former CIA guy. He's Greek. His last name's Kiriakou. So he had a meeting with these guys. They were talking with these Mossad guys in a building that was maybe, a mile away from Langley. And after the meeting, the Mossad guy goes to John and goes, Kiriakou, you are Jewish?
Exactly.
And he goes, I am not recruitable. How dare you try to recruit me a mile from Langley?
Bingo. Because they know what's going on. People in that industry know how that works. That's how it's always worked.
Yeah. Well,
that's just the nature of the game.
It is. And everyone will tell you that the Mossad is much more capable than the CIA, and they're much more efficient than the CIA because they have existential threats, and they've been through a lot. World War II. We, in America, we don't have that. We kind of live in like a fantasy world.
Yeah. 100%.
Where there's really not one thing that unifies us all.
Not since the communism, not since the USSR failed. And
I really think that people wasting their time on politics, the lowest vibrational thing you could be focusing on, the left and the right, would be the fact that the leaders of the Christians, who are littered on both sides of the aisle, have totally brainwashed us and fucked our families up. Everything. They have done everything. And, Christian America has been letting over 1 million children and women, let alone the women and the men, go missing and die and get put into forced breeder programs and all of these things, thinking that somebody outside of themselves is going to come back and save us all. And I really think that people like me who have tempers and would get up right now over this shit if they weren't alone and mentally charged up and now got to fight doctors for my sanity back on paper because I got scooped into a bunch of shit during my dark nights of the soul so that I could see how bad people on the front lines of mental health have it over all of these things and over fighting for their pineal glands activating or not. And, that's the second coming and a shebang. It's Christ consciousness. And I really think that if Christians looked at themselves and the hypodermic needles all over this country and all of the demonic stuff and realized that the Vatican, who's behind all of the Bibles people are looking at, plagiarized it all and tricked you into death cults, alien death cults, satanic ones, and this is the problem here. I think that would help unite everybody. Probably.
The Cold War fell apart, and then we replaced it with the War on Terror. But my contention would be that we didn't come up with the War on Terror. Israel came up with the War on Terror. Have you ever thought about that kind of angle there and the Clean Break report and 9/11 and just sort of the outcome of 9/11 benefited Israel in every imaginable way, and it didn't benefit any of the nations where the actual terrorists were allegedly from.
It benefited a lot of people.
Yeah, it benefited a lot of rich people.
It didn't just benefit Israel.
That's very true.
Of course they benefited.
100% true.
Of course they wanted us over there, right?
Yeah, they've always wanted those sort of neighboring Arab and Islamic nations destabilized for many reasons. And so, yeah, a lot of rich people in America benefited from the War on Terror, but you and me, like, we don't benefit from thinking of all Arab people as terrorists. But Israel very directly benefits from Americans collectively seeing Arab people as terrorists. And there's no better example than that than since October 7th, they have this sort of like jump on Arabs are, if Americans are predisposed to think that Arabs are terrorists and then October 7th happens, think how much easier regardless of who's right and regardless of what side you're personally on, like if we're all predisposed to see the Arab side as the terrorist side, then it's like obviously that's making it a lot easier for Israel to argue their case.
All three sides are equally terroristic. And when you take what the leaders of Christianity have done here and the leaders of Judaism have done here, those two branches far outweigh the bad that the Arabs have done. And this is what is really just totally destroying America, are the high horses that people are on because they don't know how bad the rabbit holes are if you want to fall down them. But I highly suggest people go straight to Paul Wallace if you don't know this already.
In an October 7th style of event. So
Yeah.
and it's not that like it's not just like, oh, Israel runs it's Israel is not even just one thing. There's everyone in that government is their own people. There's a lot of evil people. There's some good people. Like there's who knows. Everything is complicated. I think that people always want to reduce things to just like singular bad guys, singular evils, simple explanations. Like the world is so complex.
Yeah.
You can see patterns. You can kind of see the shape of things.
Yeah, the crazy thing is how much influence they have over the elections and over the presidents. They give both presidents so much money. I think Donald Trump just got $100 million from the Adelsons, right?
Yeah.
And,
they always play both sides. Right?
And yeah, it's just hard to know. It's hard to know what's real anymore, dude. Like
You want to go down a crazy rabbit hole on that?
Like
they
Donald Trump, he's the one who was responsible for moving the embassy to Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
So he is like very
the Trump
much
supporters
in
really
lockstep.
don't.
He's very much in lockstep with Israel.
Yeah, and I think the extreme, like the hardcore Trump crowd is actually, and this is like the hardcore Trump and then the Q crowd, they are on the like bandwagon of he's actually playing them. Like he's actually like kind of strongmanning them and he's like going along just enough, but he's actually not like...
Well,
and
historically, I mean, he's said things in the media like, I don't know if he wants to make a deal. There's one side I won't say who it is, but there's one side that definitely doesn't want to make a deal.
Yeah, and I can see there's some parts where like his body language in some of his interactions with Bibi over the last year or two have made me be like, that is like kind of dominant body language. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of denial about how aligned he is with a lot of those interests and a lot of that money, and has been for a long time in his life.
Well, what is he saying publicly about it right now? He's basically, I mean, I saw
publicly right now he's like the most
like, let's make it bigger.
pro-Zionist Israel thing you could ever. He's like talking like we will deport pro-Palestinian protesters. Like it's the most atrocious, from my perspective, it's the most atrocious. Like if you were a Trump supporter, so me personally, I would be a Kennedy supporter 100% if he was not super Zionist, and that leads me to all these concerns about blackmail and all these other things.
Right. And it's to support him is just to take votes away from Trump.
It's all of them, guys. They are all in. They are owned and funded by Israel. Israel is absolutely nobody's friend here but their own. And the United States is under the most sickening illusion that they're our greatest allies, and that is bullshit. We're their muscle. And I've been getting my ass handed to me a little bit over the summer, spiritual attack-wise, because of the guy I've been nonchalantly talking to for over a year now is an Army infantryman. And I'm so pissed off for him and all of these military members for being pushed into wars that they don't understand in the interest of Dracontic and Jehovian Anunnaki. Like, it pisses me off, but I'm I'm trying to let go of my anger, but I've been talking to a lot of his broken military, Christian, conservative, and liberal buddies, and have been chipping away at them pretty slowly, and they're pretty much all going through the dark nights, and their lives all kind of look like little dumpster fires right now, because they're really going through it in their minds over all of this shit. And that's what they don't want the most. They don't want women waking up, and they don't want women bitching. For sure. Because they don't want the men to be annoyed by the women and forced into waking up too. Because when they lose their Christian military, they lose the game faster. That would drop them faster than if people would stop voting. As if there is any kind of a real choice here. There's not. It is all anti the people. Clearly. They're supposed to be our servants, and they're fucking terrorists. They are against the people because the people are God. Fractals of source here living temporary human lives. And they don't want people to remember that. And I don't want people to have heart attacks when, like it or not, they don't have a choice in finding this shit out the harder ways. Because what I've seen lately is 10 booms coming. Throughout the next 6 months, it looks like an escalator of lights coming. Frequencies kicking from the sun. And it looks like, the second coming is a go, but it might get really rough. Because Christians are digging their heels in, and have been, against having their bubbles burst. And every day, people are offing themselves, kids are going missing, and nobody's doing anything about it.
Trump
It is at that point.
Why hasn't he dropped out yet?
So did you see actually just today, Shanahan on the Impact Theory podcast just announced that they are considering joining the Trump campaign? It's a big break.
I can't believe this haven't happened weeks ago.
Well, they've been considering it for a long time, but they just haven't been public about it. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised they're actually talking about it now. Okay, I guess the DNC has started. I was expecting them to wait until after the DNC to see if the Democrats had another weird curveball coming, so then they could throw the curveball. I don't know.
Right.
My understanding is that that Bobby is considering going with Trump, and that Nicole is considering doing other things that I will let her talk about. I don't know what she's necessarily said publicly. I just saw some clips before I got in here. But yeah, I think that a lot of people on Trump's side want to ignore the amount of Israeli money he takes and Israeli influence he has. And that's always been their play, is to have as much money flowing into as many of those pockets as possible, so you just control everyone. No better example than Congress and AIPAC. I actually went into the Senate is an easier one because there's only 100 senators. And when you look at all 100 senators today, 93 of them took AIPAC money on the road to winning their seat. And
yeah, you were showing this on your Twitter. You were showing like their website where it shows like this many votes won, this much money contributed. Like they're bragging about it openly.
And and a lot of people think it's like the more money they pay, the more influence that. Not really. It's like they just need to win the seat, right? And so in an easy race, maybe they only need to contribute a little bit. Maybe in a really hard race, like they need to put in millions and millions of dollars to defeat someone. But then it turns out of those other 7, like 3 of them are actually Zionists anyways. They just didn't need any help winning, so they didn't give them any money. So it's like that's like our entire Congress is bought by AIPAC, which is just absurd. And just another funny JFK coincidence is that JFK had literally sent the paperwork to AIPAC, well, the precursor to AIPAC, for them to register under FARA the month before he got shot. And then the month after he gets shot, Israel sends back a letter that says, this is cool and all, but we don't think we qualify. We're not going to register. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if so. You think that AIPAC had something to do with Kennedy, or Israel had?
I think Israel certainly had a lot to do with Kennedy.
Really?
Yeah.
How so? I don't think AIPAC. I don't think there's
No, not AIPAC.
AIPAC
Just
didn't become
Israel
powerful until the 80s.
Just the Zionists in general, just the Zionist cause. Like, this is during the most important time in Israel's history. Israel has just been founded, and they have just started stealing nuclear material. They have just stolen nuclear material from the United States, from NUMEC, and they are building nuclear bombs. And from the Israeli perspective, they're a new state that was literally founded by organized crime, along with Rothschild banking money, along with a bunch of paramilitary groups that were later classified as terrorist groups because what they did was so atrocious. That's how they founded it. And so they were in this really precarious place where it was not a far stretch for things to turn on them and the international community to be like, this is so messed up, guys, you got to stop, or for like an Arab war to break out and them to lose. And so their success was in no way guaranteed at that point. And they had realized, like probably from the very start, that if we had nukes, our survival is pretty much guaranteed. And we got to get nukes. And so they, within the Zionist circles, they started talking about that. We don't know for sure, but it seems as though they had been talking about that for quite some time. And they started this NUMEC operation, and they got nuclear material and started building the Dimona nuclear facility out in the desert. And Kennedy was extremely vocal about wanting to go there and inspect it and shut down any nuclear program that they had.
Where was this?
In Dimona. It was
Where's
like
that?
It's in the deserts in Israel.
Okay.
I'm certainly not a geography guy.
Right.
But yeah, it's just kind of like middle of nowhere desert. And it was funded largely by the Rothschilds, along with this really famous like Jewish Zionist like actor, celebrity actually, that just had a lot of ties to organized crime in America. So again, it was basically funded by the Rothschilds banking money, organized crime collectively raising a bunch of money in America, and France actually did a deal with them that gave them like a bunch of the technology to build the reactors and stuff, because France wanted something in Africa and Israel. It's kind of complicated, but so they had just essentially acquired the ability to build nukes, and they were building nukes, and Kennedy was like trying to shut it down. And that is essentially, at that point in Israel's history, that is an existential threat to the entire existence of their state, because not only would they lose their nukes if he had succeeded, but that then becomes condemnable, right? Then you've just been caught stealing nuclear technology and doing secret nuclear proliferation. So you don't just like go back to square one. You then might actually, that might be an existential threat to your nation as well, because then the international community can turn on you. So that is circumstantial, right? That is just sort of like the motive. But there's also a lot of Zionist ties to a lot of the people that sort of like the organized crime elements. And I'm not saying it was all Israel by any means. I'm just saying that there are fingerprints of Israel, and there's a lot of motive and means. And LBJ, who came in afterwards, was rather friendly with Israel. I don't know if there's any smoking gun in any way. And I think that I've seen people sort of like present the story as though they have a smoking gun. And I'm not so sure. I've not vetted that stuff for myself. I don't know. But I highly suspect that they had a hand to play, because clearly it was more than one party. It was at least some CIA assets involved, some kind of mafia, mob, like organized crime assets involved. LBJ was probably involved.
So yeah, there's a...
This interview goes on for a hot minute. But it's a really good one if anybody else wants to go check it out, because, I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you look at the politicians and the things that have happened in Pennsylvania specifically during this, political cycle bullshit we're going through right now. And then, look at our Jewish governor and realize they're all in cahoots against us. I mean, that's definitely what the main shocking truth is obviously we're watching the WWE guys. How is this happening? What are we missing? And you're missing information that people like Paul Wallace have. It's a big Ouroboros. Who are the leaders of the politicians and the biggest religions, the Abrahamic branch? Who are they empowering? what you think are the forces of Satan, satanic dark forces, are who the Abrahamic branch have tricked us all into empowering. And it's time to spiritually wake up. Toodles.